Hi, this is Jonathan Rosenhead, Jerusalem psychotherapist. This week's Torah psychology post for Pesach is titled Projective Identification. There's a mitzvah on Leil Seder to recite and tell over the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. And there's also a mitzvah of V'higadat levincha, of telling it over to your sons. And these two mitzvahs is the epitome of the process of Leil Seder, of sitting down and reciting the Haggadah, reciting the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and teaching it to our children. And to this extent, in the Haggadah, we read about the four sons. And the four sons is a way of giving instruction and guidance of how to tell over the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim to different types of children. We have the Chacham, we have the Rasha, we have the Tam, and we have the She'ena Yodei Lishol. And what the Haggadah seems to be saying is that it's presenting four archetypal representations of children, different types of children. And the Haggadah presents and teaches and instructs the ways that we should respond to the questions of the four sons. The questions and the answers reflect the different personalities of these four sons. But the Rambam says that even if a person is by himself, he still needs to read the Haggadah. So even if a person doesn't have his family around him, doesn't have sons, he still is going to read the Haggadah. He's still going to read about the four sons. And therefore, this sort of guidance of how to teach and instruct a person's children seems less pertinent or not relevant to a person who's sitting by himself. So the fact that the Rambam says that a person has a mitzvah to still sit by himself on Leil Seder and recite the Haggadah and talk about the four sons means that these different personalities of the four sons are perhaps not referring to actual children or four different types of characters, but rather it's talking about the person himself. It relates to the person themselves and the different personalities and different characteristics of an individual person. Because we can say that a person is made up of different characteristics, different character traits, and some of them a person is aware of and accepts, and some of them a person might not be aware of, or to be more accurate, might reject. So the positive characteristics and the personality traits they engage in and they are aware of. So sometimes it could be that this personality trait of a Chacham is very familiar to us, or perhaps sometimes we can relate to the idea of being a Tam. But the Rasha, this personality trait of a Rasha, might be difficult to relate to, difficult to connect to, and a person might be unwilling to accept. So subconsciously they reject this negative personality trait. They reject this idea of having something in some personality traits within them as being a Rasha. And this relates to projective identification, which is a psychodynamic process described by Melanie Klein that says that a person is able to accept the positive aspects of their personality, but they don't want to accept the negative aspects of their personality, so they reject it, and in a subconscious way they project it onto somebody else. This can be a friend, a family member, and they will identify it onto somebody else rather than acknowledging it and accepting that it's actually part of them and taking ownership of this negative personality trait. So the therapeutic process of projective identification is a process of integration, that we are able to recognize and integrate these different aspects of our personality, the positive and the negative. And it's interesting, the Haggadah says that in response to the Rasha, we should blunt his teeth. Now, what kind of message is this? It sounds like it's a message of punishment. That the Rasha is there and we don't want to accept him, we reject him, we push him away. Whether we push away the son, or we push away or punish and reject this negative aspect of being a Rasha characteristic trait within us. So this doesn't sound like a very therapeutic method to blunt, to be violent and to push it away and to reject it. So interestingly, Rav Moshe Sternbach explains that this message of blunting your teeth is not a punishment, but rather the Rasha is an impulsive person. He wants to jump to conclusions, he just wants to hear the answers, and he's not interested in processing and learning. And therefore, Rav Moshe Sternbach says that when a person eats, a person should take time to chew the food, to bite the food until they can digest it. And it's not healthy to swallow the food whole, to swallow it immediately. And this is what the Rasha wants to do. He just wants to swallow the answers. He wants to swallow things straight away. And therefore, he doesn't need his teeth. There's no need for his teeth. And therefore, the Haggadah says, blunt his teeth. And this is a message of allowing a person to be. If there is a characteristic trait within us, which is a rasha, we should just let it be. We shouldn't push it away or reject it, and we should just let it be until we can learn that this behavior is actually an unhealthy behavior, and we can learn to try to change this behavior. And interestingly as well, Rav Soloveitchik comments that before we talk about the four sons, the Haggadah says, Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. And Rav Soloveitchik explains that Hamakom refers to the place. Hashem is referred to as the place, that Hashem is everywhere. The place of Hashem is omnipotent, He's omnipresent, it's everywhere. And Hashem can be found everywhere. And everyone can connect to Hashem wherever they are, whoever they are. And therefore, when we have before introducing the four sons, and we have the Rasha, we have the Rasha, and we have the Chacham, we have the She'ena Yodei Lishal and the Tam. By saying Baruch HaMakom, it's saying that all these four sons and all these characteristics, all these personality traits are welcome, they are present and they are important, and they have a role to play. And therefore, we have to say that this message is that all four sons and all four characteristic traits are present at the Haggadah, and we need to accept them, we need to integrate them. And as we go through the process of the Haggadah, this process of Leil Seder, where we say Manish Tana, we want to recognize what is different about Leil Seder, and through the process of Leil Seder, where we recognize and we ask lots of questions, and we start to see what has changed, what is different. If at the beginning of Leil Seder we are only a Chacham, by the end of the Seder, when we go through this process of Manish Tana, we should hopefully be able to understand and realize and engage with the fact that we are Chacham, but we are also perhaps a Rasha, we also have She'ena Yodei Lishal, we also have a characteristic of a Tam, and many, many more personality traits. And we should embrace this and integrate it within ourselves. Have a great Shabbos, Chag Pesach Kal Sheva Sameach, and keep well.